Hello everybody and welcome to this workflow tutorial on how to control Pixera from a lighting console over ArtNet. I will guide you through the whole process from setting up Pixera to receive ArtNet, how to create a fixture for the controllable params, and finally how to set up your lighting console. Let's start in Pixera. Now here in Pixera I've created a simple show file with two timelines. On timeline 1 we've got two layers. And on timeline 2, we've got one layer. Notice that this layer doesn't have any resource assigned to it and has two effects on it. The resource that will be displaying on this layer, we will assign through DMX later in the process. Now, the first thing we have to do is patch all the params we want to control over ArtNet. So click on a timeline, go into the inspector, open the DMX patch submenu and click on patch timeline. Now the patching dialog will open. First, let's get an overview on what is happening here. So on the left, we got the names of the params we can control. Right next to that, there is a checkbox that is indicating if a param is patched or not and thus is receiving ArtNet input or not. Next to that, we have controls for subnet, universe, and address, which have to match your setup in the lighting console. Right next to that, there's the footprint, which is telling us how many channels are occupied by a timeline or a layer. Right next to that, we have an option for setting the resolution of a given param. Notice that most of the params are grayed out. That is because most of the params have a fixed resolution. This is different for effect params and custom GDTF device params. Right next to that we have the DMX values that Pixera is expecting to receive. And next to that we have the mapped min and mapped max values, which are the values that are also present in the user interface. So for example, opacity, as it is a 16-bit channel, Pixera is expecting DMX values from 0 to 65,535. The default is also the maximum DMX value, but the mapped min is 0 and the mapped max is 1. So if you're sending 65,535, the opacity will go up to 1. If you send 0, the opacity will go down to 0. If you send half of the max value, it will go to 0.5. Now let's begin to patch some params. So I want to control every timeline, so I will patch the timeline controls, which also patches the transport, queues, SMPTE, and opacity params. And we will need to patch layer 1 and also layer 2, but let's do that a little bit later. Now on this layer I want to be able to disable DMX input. So I will patch this property. I don't want to assign a resource over my lighting console, so I don't patch that. But I want to patch the opacity. I don't want to control the transport mode, as this is controlled by the timeline transport. But I want to patch the position, rotation, and scale parameters. Let's do the same thing for layer number 2. So now everything is patched, but all the addresses of the params are overlapping, which is bad. So you can either set those by hand or let Pixera do it for you, at least if you have nothing patched yet. So let's do that. Auto patch layers will assign the right addresses for each param. Keep in mind that we have to patch each timeline individually, and Pixera is not keeping track of all the addresses that are used over multiple timelines. So we have to remember the last address is 46, which has a resolution of 16-bit. So this is also occupying address 47. Now let's go ahead and close this dialog. Select timeline 2, patch timeline again. Go into timeline controls. And now on this layer, I don't want to be able to mute DMX, as this layer is purely controlled by DMX, not a video operator. I want to assign resources on the fly. I want to change the opacity, and I also want to set the transport mode. Also, I want to be able to control all the effect parameters. So, as we have remembered, the next free address in our universe is 48. So I will set that here. And as we have a footprint of 5, we need to set this starting address at 45. So let's auto-patch all of these values. And I see I've made a mistake, so we can set this to 53. Now that everything is patched, we need to export our patch. So we can either create a fixture or just load a fixture. If you have GrandMA 3 or GrandMA 2, you can export the patch as GDTF. In GrandMA 3, you can just load the files that are created by this. For GrandMA 2, there is a conversion process involved that I will show you later. Let's begin with the export of an XML table. This is used for every other console that is not understanding the GDTF file format. So let's create a patch file. Let's call that DMX tutorial patch and enter. So now Pixera wrote a folder which contains the XML file and an HTML file. If you double click on the HTML file and open it in your browser, you will see a table which states all the informations we need to create a custom fixture. You have to do this process for every timeline individually, as you have to patch every timeline individually. I will not go into further detail on how to create a fixture in every lighting console, as this would take a long time. But I think this will help every one of you that has to create a fixture from scratch. Now, if we are using GrandMA, we can just export the fixture files as GDTF, which can be loaded into GrandMA 3 natively. And as most of you will operate the lighting console on a different machine than that Pixera is running on, we also have an option for exporting with a whole folder structure that MA is expecting. So we are going ahead, click Export Patch as GDTF. If you have GrandMA installed on the same machine Pixera is running, Pixera will automatically search for the right path for the internal fixture database. So you can create your fixture right there, but I want to export my fixtures to a USB thumb drive, so an operator can load it into his console later. Just remove these folders that are still here and choose a new name. So DMX tutorial patch. Now you can see we have a whole folder structure that GrandMA is understanding and can just read all the Fixture files from. We have to repeat this process also for the timeline 1. Let's go ahead and do that. If you already have a folder structure for GrandMA, Pixera will detect that and will not write the folder structure again. The name you are entering right here is meaningless to GrandMA. It's just for organizing your files in the Windows Explorer. So you can choose whatever you want. Now that we have exported everything, you can go into GrandMA. Go into Patch, GDTF, go into Volume, and now we have all the fixtures we just created. I recommend to begin with the timeline that is patched on the first address. So in my case, timeline 1 was selected, patch it to address 1. Next is layer 1. Layer 2. Timeline 2. And layer 3. Now we will save the patch. I will open a new fixture window. And as you can see, we have all the controls we just patched. So if I go on the timeline 1, I can simply click on the timeline control tab, change the transport mode. All the macros are auto-generated by Pixera. I can also go onto layer 1. Under layer control, I can set opacity, mute, which also has auto-generated macros. If you have effects in your layer, Pixera will automatically generate macros for muting and unmuting your effects as well. Keep in mind that the fixtures work best if you set your readout to physical. For example, the layer opacity we can now see is from 0 to 1. The position is from minus 32,768 to 32,068. But what if you don't use GrandMA 3? If you are using GrandMA 2 instead of GrandMA 3. So there is a simple conversion process that you can use, provided by GrandMA itself. You just have to open your web browser, go to the fixture share site of MA Lighting, choose GrandMA 2, and click here on the upload button. You cannot multi-select your files and convert them all at the same time. You have to import them or convert at one at a time. So I will do a quick example on my timeline 1 file. I will drag it in here, choose AV Stumpfel, and you have to enter a revision name. So I will just name it revision 1 and click on convert. Now you get a prompt that is saying that the conversion succeeded, and you get a mail to download your file. So now I have received the mail and clicked on the link, and now I can download my fixture file for GrandMA 2. And now we have got the file. So I will copy it and simply paste it under the desired directory. And now to import the file into GrandMA 2, you need first to create the directory for the fixture library. The easiest way to do that is to open GrandMA 2 with the USB thumb drive inserted into the console or the PC GrandMA is running at. Open the import fixture type dialog, select volume or the name of your thumb drive. Then GrandMA will create all the folder structure you need. And then you just go under library and copy the XML file that you got from the site. Now we just update here, and now we got timeline 1, and we can click import. Yes, please, 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 please. Yes, I want to save. And now, as you can see, we have all the controls similar to GrandMA 3 in GrandMA 2. Now let's close GrandMA 2, and I will explain you on how to connect Pixera to ArtNet. So in Pixera, you just click the setting icon, go into API settings, choose the right network adapter. So for example, I'm running my ArtNet network on the 2.3.0.x space, so I will select that as my input, and I will select ArtNet. The port is automatically set to the right port. And now if we go into compositing and open GrandMA, now in GrandMA, I will open the setup dialog for ArtNet. I have set the mode to broadcast because I'm running all of it on the same machine. And I will enable the output. Now we see Pixera is receiving ArtNet data, so we can close that, minimize it for the moment. And to check if all the values are coming in the right way, first set everything to physical. Now let's test if we can indeed set the timeline opacity for timeline 1. And let's set that to 0. And now, as we can see, the timeline opacity is set to 0. Now, for assigning resources, as we can on layer 3, let's go into layer control, change to folder ID and resource ID controls. Now, before you can assign resources, you have to assign IDs to your folder that the resource is holding and to the resources you want to assign. So I want to load the server video, which gets resource ID 1, and the Sucher MOV, which gets ID 2. And also the tunnel video, which gets ID 3. Let's switch to timeline 2. As we can see, there's nothing loaded yet. So let's go into GrandMA, set the folder ID to 1, and set the resource ID to 1 as well. And now it has loaded the server video. Now we can also control the transport mode. Let's go under layer transport, go onto channel sets, and let's select play looped. And now we should see, indeed, the video is looping. So now we can begin to edit some of the values here. For example, let's fade in the vignette effect. We just have to click on a vignette hub, vignette mix, and set it to 100. And now the vignette is faded in. Let's switch the timeline opacities around so we see timeline 1 but not timeline 2. Just select timeline, go under timeline control, timeline opacity, 0, timeline opacity, 100. And now we can edit timeline 1. So now if the video operator wants to set the position by himself, we just have to go under layer 1, layer control, mute DMX, under channel sets, mute position. And now we can set the position here without being affected by GrandMA. So whatever I'm telling GrandMA to send for position, Pixera will not change its value unless we set the mute to unmute all or unmute position. I hope I have answered all of your questions about how you can interact with Pixera over a lighting console, and wish you a very pleasant day. Goodbye.